Hello, friends, and hope everyone's doing well out there in internet land. I'm just hanging out in my classroom, and I got maybe half an hour before my first class this morning, so I thought, what a good time to make a video. We've even got this big, beautiful whiteboard, right? So let's take a look. Now, this is going to be a continuation of my It's All Chinese to Me series, okay? And basically, in this series, we're looking at Chinese and we're kind of doing a basic discussion of Chinese linguistics, all right? And, I think something that I've heard many people say is Chinese is the hardest language in the world. And, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but I don't think any one language is inherently harder than another, with a few exceptions, for example, Creoles, which are designed to be easy. But back to Chinese, I think that one of the reasons people perceive Chinese as being extremely difficult is because of Chinese orthography, or in non-linguist terms, the writing system, okay? And I think that a lot of people think of Chinese similarly to the way we think of the English alphabet. So, in the English alphabet, we have 26 symbols, right? Whereas in Chinese, I think an average literate Chinese person knows 3,000, maybe if you went to college, you'd know 5,000 symbols. So, 26 versus 5,000, that's a lot to learn. I think that while English letters represent sounds, Chinese symbols represent words, right? And I think that a lot of people have some idea of that. Whereas English letters are sounds, Chinese symbols are words. And that's more or less accurate. Well, I think it would be more accurate to say that one Chinese symbol, I guess we should say Hanzi. Hanzi is the proper name. One Hanzi represents a one-syllable morpheme. Let's write that down, morpheme. Now, what is a morpheme? Morphemes are cool. In fact, there's a whole branch of linguistics dedicated to morphemes called morphology. But morphemes are great. So let's look at the word, for example, teacher. Teacher, okay? The word teacher contains two morphemes. Teach, okay? So teach, to impart knowledge, and one who doesn't. All right, so these are the morphemes in teacher. These are morphemes. So a morpheme is basically, I like to think of it as, I was always really bad at physics and chemistry in high school, but I do remember that in chemistry, an atom is the smallest piece of an element that you can have while retaining the characteristics of that element. So think of a morpheme as the atom of grammar. So a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning that you can have while retaining said meaning. All right, so for example, with this is my morpheme. It denotes one who does this thing, right? So it basically takes a verb and turns it into a noun. Teacher, dancer, runner, right? Swimmer, right? So if we take this off, so suppose we just say teachy, right? This means nothing. So we need the this kind of and this is a morpheme. This gives us the meaning of teacher. So that's what a morpheme is. And in Chinese, I think it would be fair to say that one symbol, again, or Hanzi, we say Hanzi in Chinese, one Hanzi represents one morpheme, and it's a one-syllable morpheme, okay? So, that said, when I first started to study Chinese, I think the idea behind the writing system seemed fairly straightforward, fairly simple. I think this is something that a lot of people think when they first start studying Chinese, at least I thought this. With an alphabetic system, like we have sounds, whereas in Chinese, instead of writing out the sounds of a word, you basically make a stylized doodle of the thing that you're talking about, right? So let's think of an example. I think last month we had a video about with a sentence in Chinese, he loves his parents, right? And in the sentence we had this Hanzi. Remember, Hanzi is a Chinese symbol. This Hanzi. Okay? And this Hanzi is mu, and another way to write it is mu with a 3 because it's third tone. But let's just do this for now. Mu, and what mu means is mother. This is one word for mother, and I think it can also mean female, like a female animal. But this is the word mu, and it means mother. Now, this is a very easy Hanzi to remember because, like I said, it's a stylized doodle. Whoops, excuse me. Basically, this is a crude doodle of a pair of breasts. Okay, and of course, breasts represent motherhood, so easy enough to remember, right? Now, things become a lot more complex, okay, when you have to make a doodle of an abstract concept, right? So, for example, how in the world do we make a doodle of good? Well, maybe if some people have started studying Chinese or some basic Chinese, maybe you already know. And what is this? What is the Hanzi for good? It's this. Okay? And again, third tone. So hao as opposed to how or how, right? But hao is the word for good. And the Hanzi for good is a doodle of a woman next to a baby. Because, of course, it's a baby needs mom around, right? And it's good when mom is around to take care of the baby. Therefore, good is a doodle of a mom and a baby. So, you know, I think that's quite sweet, quite cute. But and it's really smart if you think about it. It's brilliant. Now, what I didn't know when I first started learning Chinese is that Hanzi can also have phonetic elements too. So let's look. I'm sorry, my stroke order is off. In Chinese, you need to have the right stroke order, or the Hanzi is wrong, and maybe you've seen my stroke order. It's not quite right. Is that right? I believe that's right. I believe that's right. Anyway, this is ma. Okay, ma. And wait a minute, you might say, you know, this is the same doodle of a lady that we saw earlier, right? So here's the doodle of a lady, and this lady is standing next to a doodle of a horse, right? So therefore, if we have, okay, so if there's a doodle of a lady and a doodle of a horse, then maybe it means cowgirl, or maybe it means female horse, right? So it could mean a few different things. Well, no, actually, this word is another word for mother. And we say the same thing in English, ma, hey ma. You know, I think that's across many languages across the world, this mama for mother and baba for father. This is something that a baby says when he's first starting to make sounds with his mouth. So that's why we have this phenomenon in languages across the world. But anyway, ma is the word for mother, or one other word for mother. So why? Why do we have a doodle of a horse? Well, the horse represents, in this Hanzi, it represents not the meaning of the word. The meaning of the word is the lady, but the horse represents the sound. So the standard Chinese word for horse, and let's write horse again. So down here, let's try this. Whoops. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the traditional character. I think the simplified version that most people use these days is this one. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. But anyway, yeah, there's, as if this weren't complicated enough, there are actually two forms of written Chinese. There's the traditional and the simplified, which are used in different countries and different places. But anyway, so here's the character for a horse, right? Which is maha, right? And so this is the standard Chinese word for horse. So let's take a look. The word for mother is ma, whereas the word for horse is ma. So the horse represents the sound, whereas the woman represents the meaning. So if I look up this word, this Hanzi, this symbol, in a dictionary, maybe it will translate the word as mother or mom. But the true meaning of this symbol is closer to the sound ma in reference to a woman, right? The womanly ma, something like that. Or even the one associated with womanhood that sounds like the word for horse. That's the true meaning of this Hanzi. Isn't that brilliant? I love that. So anyway, the problem here is that, that's so cool. I love that. It's such a trip. The problem here is that this system, it's a brilliant system of meaning plus sound, has become horrendously convoluted. I should say beautifully convoluted. A lot of the semantic elements, the meaning elements, for example, the doodle of the lady in the word ma, the semantic elements only make sense if you understand the cultural references that would have been made by the ancient Chinese literati of the 10th century BC. Sorry, BCE. So take, for example, here's a good word. This is a color, so, colors are always good to know. Let's see. Here we go. See if I can remember it. All right, and this is Huang. Okay, and Huang is the color yellow. And so this is a combination. This element right here is sunlight. All right, and this element here is a field. So, easy enough, right? It's the sun shining on a field, and of course the sun is yellow, sunlight is yellow, therefore Huang, being yellow, is a doodle of the sun, and it's coming down on some nice little field, happy little field, as the immortal Bob Ross may say. But anyway, so the sunlight, the sun is yellow, right? Well, no, I'm afraid. Actually, sunlight here has the word guang, and I think it's guang with the first tone, so guang, and this is the word for sunlight. So this is not the semantic element, but rather it is the phonetic element. So if guang is the sunlight, and this has nothing to do with yellowness, in the mind of an ancient Chinese scholar, the sun had nothing to do with yellowness. Guang referred only to the sound of this character. You see, Huang, Guang, so very close sound, right? So the meaning is all encoded in the field element. So let's look at the field. What does field and yellowness have in common with each other? Well, if you think about it, in the ancient Chinese traditional culture, field referred, or yellow was the color of the earth. The element of earth was represented by the color yellow. Therefore, from earth, it's a quick jump to field, right? So really, the meaning of this character is not so much yellow as it is the thing that sounds like the word for sunlight, but really refers to something associated with fields and general earthiness, right? So really, that's what we're seeing when we look at this symbol. But wait, as the late, great Billy Mays might say, there's more. Okay, so, and it's not getting any easier, I'm afraid. Let's take this even to another level. Let's step it up. So, as you might think, right, not only do we have to make these cultural references, but in order to really understand the phonetic elements in Hanzi, you can't always go by how the words sound in modern standard Chinese. You actually have to reconstruct what they would have sounded like in Old Chinese, which was the language of the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty, where the writing system was developed, which honestly even most Chinese speakers don't learn unless they themselves are historical linguists. Now, Old Chinese is not to be confused with Classical Chinese. Classical Chinese is like a written form of late Old Chinese that is learned by most high school kids. Classical Chinese is using, as learned by high school kids anyway, uses modern pronunciation, okay, and back in the time it was written, it would have sounded completely different. Okay, kind of like in high school in America, and I'm sure in the UK too, kids learn Shakespeare, right? But we read Shakespeare with a modern American English accent. We don't read Shakespeare as it was originally pronounced, which is actually quite different. It's really cool. It's almost kind of a southern drawl combined with a Boston accent. It's really cool. Look it up. But anyway, we don't actually pronounce Shakespeare with the phonetics of early modern English. We read it in modern English, right? So it's roughly analogous to Classical Chinese. Kids read Classical Chinese, but they pronounce it in a modern way. They don't actually speak Old Chinese. They don't actually use the phonetics of Old Chinese. So another example to illustrate this, okay, another example from the video I did a month ago is this Hanzi. Okay, and maybe, again, those of us who are Chinese students, we already know this character. This one is ta, okay? And what does it mean? It means he, him, and sometimes even his, right? So this, what is the breakdown of this symbol? Let's take a look. Okay, so if we look at the two parts of the Hanzi, this one here, this means man or mankind or even sometimes human being, right? Whereas this element is ye, okay, and this is the phonetic element. Now, how does that work? In modern standard Chinese, all right, this means this word ye, so let's write this. This is ren, meaning person or man, and this is ye, which means, in modern standard Chinese, it means also. But in Old Chinese did not mean also. It meant like, it was an emphatic particle that you would put at the end of a sentence. Like in modern Mongolian, you would say shu de, or in English, you might say indeed, like yes indeed, really yes, right? Yes indeed. So this was kind of an emphatic particle, like a spoken exclamation point in Old Chinese, okay? So it again, the meaning of this symbol, all right, is not so much he, him, his, as it is a man who sounds like the word for indeed. So a man who sounds like yeah. Oh, but wait a minute. Ta and yeah sound nothing alike, right? So how can yeah be the phonetic element for a word like ta? The answer comes from comparative linguistics, ancient historical linguistics. When we reconstruct the Old Chinese, again, this is the way Chinese was spoken 3,000 years ago, not the way it's spoken today. When we reconstruct Old Chinese, it becomes clear that both, this one, I shouldn't have erased it, and this one, so ta and ye, were both pronounced as something like this. Maybe like that. Lai, or lai, or lie, or maybe or lie, or okay, or lie, something like this. And the L for this one gradually turned into a T, whereas for this one turned into a Y sound. All right, so we had, again, 3,000 years ago, lie or lie, something like this, and now it is pronounced y, ta, so it no longer has the same pronunciation. Wow, so basically the conclusion is the phonetic element for this Hansa made sense 3,000 years ago, but it doesn't make sense now. Is that not insane? Isn't that a trip? And that is Chinese. So, wholly convoluted, Batman, right? But at the same time, isn't this super creative and interesting and cool? Like, it's so awesome that all of these symbols were able to come together, how all of these symbols came together. I mean, my new hobby is just going onto Wiktionary and looking up Chinese symbols and trying to piece together how they came about. Wiktionary is awesome, by the way. I love Wiktionary. Go check it out if you haven't done it before. It's basically a catalog of definitions that also includes etymology. Really cool. Anyway, so these are all very basic words, right? I feel like they should be in every Chinese textbook for a beginner, and these are what you would learn in the first semester of a Chinese class, right? But you don't learn the cool stuff like this, the phonetic element, the semantic element. You don't learn that. And instead you just learn that this is ta, and you're told to copy it 10 times, right? The cool stories and things like this are sacrificed on the altar of practicality or relevance or whatever. And I feel like that's not right. You know, as a language teacher, I don't do this with kids because, kids don't care, but with my adult students, I always try to bring historical linguistics into the classroom. So with advanced adult learners, because I really think that helps solidify things. If books and teachers told adult learners the stories and the cultural contexts behind words, then we would never forget these words, and learning a language would be about 10 times more fun too. But you know what? That's too much work for most people. Most people don't want to learn historical linguistics, or most language teachers think that historical linguistics is a waste of time. So, that's too much research. Instead, just copy this 10 times or 100 times and remember that it means he. And, now let's move on to the next lesson, which has something, I don't know, I go to school by bus. Nothing to do with this cool ancient Chinese culture or anything like that, just some completely mundane topic that doesn't really make the culture and the language come alive for students. So that's my little rant for the day. Take from it what you will. By the way, one more cool thing. Let's look at this. I want to leave you just with one more cool thing. All right. So remember, what is this? Ma. All right. And this means horse. All right. Now, that's interesting because this sounds like some other words. And if we go back maybe 6,000, 7,000 years to the earliest proto-language from which modern Chinese is descended, called Proto-Sino-Tibetan, we look at this word. We have this word. Smrangs. Smrangs. This is an NG. Smrangs. And it means horse. All right? Which is pretty cool. This mra. Something like that. Because that sounds a lot like the Mongolian word Morth. That means horse. Morth. Also meaning horse. And the Proto-Indo-European word for horse, which is mark. And even the modern descendants of this word, are you guys ready? This is a trip. All right, hold on to your seat. The modern English word, mare. Wow, that is an old word. If if in fact it is not a coincidence, this is an old word that probably was even used by the first people who domesticated the horse on the steppes of Central Asia, maybe some 7,000 years ago, 5,000, 7,000 years ago. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, that's enough. That's enough from me today, and enough historical linguistics, I'm sure, for a little while. So everybody take care. Thank you for hanging around, and I hope you learned a little bit about Chinese symbols and a little bit more about the Chinese language. And maybe we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.